Thanks for joining us today. I'm Bill Barth. I'm the editor of the Beloit Daily News. We're here today to talk about one of the most crucial quarter centuries in our community's history. To put this program in perspective, let's go back 25 years. The upper Midwest, including the Beloit area, was struggling with the Rust Belt phenomenon. Cities in this part of the country had prospered through the industrial age, but manufacturing was declining, jobs were disappearing, social fallout was increasing, crime was rising, hope was slipping. Beloit had reason to worry about its reputation and its future. The challenge this community and others faced was clear. Needed to find a way forward, to renew, to reinvent, revitalize. Into that breach stepped a group of people, mostly from business, with strong support from academia and government. Their civic purpose became not only a vision for the community's future, but also to find the means to make that vision reality. They decided to call the organization Beloit 2000. The results over the years are obvious. Directly or indirectly, Beloit 2000, now called Beloit 2020, had a hand in helping to create tens of millions of dollars in investment and hundreds of new jobs. Moreover, it has amounted to a community turnaround, with people from other cities visiting here these days, looking for ways to drive their own community improvement programs. We're gathered here today to talk about what has happened because of Beloit 2020 and to look ahead to what may happen in the coming years. We are joined by the 6 men who have served as president of Beloit 2000, now Beloit 2020. I'd like to introduce them. To my left is Charles Hart, the first president. Longtime successful insurance, real estate man. Charlie served as president from 1988 to 1998. Next is Gary Grabowski. Gary served from 1998 to 2004. Gary is a CPA and has led the Beloit Foundation, which has been a critical connection for this organization. Next is Greg Britton. Greg served as president from 2004 to 2006, came to the organization as CEO of Beloit Memorial Hospital and Beloit Health Systems. On this side now, Jim Fisher. Jim served as president of 2020 from 2006 to 2011. Jim came as the top executive for Fairbanks Morse Engine in Beloit. Next is Henry Knippel. Henry came as the top executive at the Regal Beloit Corporation, now called Regal, I guess.
Regal,
right?
yeah.
Henry served from 2011 to 2013 as president. And finally, the man on the hot seat today is Dwight Cruz. Dwight is a successful real estate man in town, runs Century 21. Dwight is the current president since 2013 and is looking forward to the coming years. With that, I'd like to turn to Mr. Hart, who was here from the beginning. And Charlie, if you could talk to us about what had to be an exciting time, but also a very daunting time when the ideas were first starting to come together. You were seeing the issues on the street and what the community was going through, what it might need, and you were trying to form an organization that would address some of these needs. Could you talk to us a little bit about how it got started, how you set priorities, how you set goals, who were some of the people who came together and started to find a vision to try to make something happen?
Thank you. Yes, it was in 1988 when we had a fairly major crime occur in Beloit, a serious crime. And Beloit, as you mentioned earlier, was being beaten up, I thought, in the newspapers around the state, and being more or less called the cesspool of the state, if you would, which was a little drastic. And so at least one evening I said to my wife, I have to do something. And she said, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know. But the next day it occurred to me that I should get a hold of John Eldred, president of the First National Bank, and John was so community committed. I suggested to him that we would like to do something. Would he help? And he said, sure, he'd be happy to help. So John basically brought the group of people together who were very influential people at the time, community leaders. We started with a very small group. I think Gary Grabowski was part of the original group. And we began to meet and talk about what we could do. And we were looking for direction. And on the early stages, we invited in someone from the Greater Milwaukee Committee. And they were a committee similar to what Beloit 2000 became, but they were experienced. And learned some valuable lessons from them, which were valuable then, I think valuable today. And that was, well, number one, they said, be sure that you make a partnership with your political leaders within the community. That's important. Keep them informed about what you're doing. Secondly, they said, when you're getting people involved who are very busy people, you need to make sure that whatever project you do has a very clear beginning and a very clear ending. And I think those lessons were valuable then and valuable today. And so from that, we moved along, and eventually, what was the gentleman's name who came in? Phil Lewis, thank you. He came in from the University of Wisconsin. We engaged him, and he developed a kind of a general plan for the area. As I recall, at that time, we didn't have ownership of the property. We just were looking for what we could do. And so after that, it was decided that we needed someone to raise $2 million. That would be the amount of money we thought we needed to acquire the property and to begin the process. And so John Eldred stepped up to the plate again and became chairman of that committee and did, in fact, raise the $2 million. And so from there, we eventually bought all the property that was involved.
And the property that you speak about, the group sort of focused on the Rock River as the primary catalyst.
Correct.
In the city's center.
Yeah,
right?
what we did over a very short period of time, quite frankly, I think within a year or so, we purchased the property from, I believe it's Public and Pleasant, all the way up to the coal yard, the WP&L plant, and then across the street from the river on the north side of the river on Portland, from the river back to the Pleasant again, and then where the Dairy Queen is currently behind that, where the apartments are, there were houses, and it was a pretty substantial amount of property. I think there were a couple of taverns involved, there was a bowling alley involved, there were dry cleaners and some gas stations and a used car dealership, and so it was quite a feat to be able to get all that under ownership without anyone knowing exactly what we're doing. So. Mm-hmm. And I might mention, I think that at that time, there was a lot of concern in the community about what was going on because we weren't public about what was going on. And so they were asking the city council, and they weren't able to tell people because we were trying to acquire this property and keep the values within a realistic goal. And we did acquire the properties, by the way. I think it's important to know that within 5% of the assessed value, which I thought was quite a feat at the time. And anyway, so that we progressed to that point, and then we came out with our announcement of what we're doing, and be able to show what Phil had suggested that we do, and then moved about trying to accomplish that.
And what were some of those, once you had the property under ownership and you were looking toward the next step, how did you identify what that next step would be and start to move in that direction?
Well, I think the basic thing was the infrastructure of the area regarding the sidewalks and lighting and benches and that sort of thing. Those were the basic things that we were trying to accomplish. And fortunately, as we moved along, more things happened. The Rotary Club stepped up and built the Rotary River Center, and the Lions Club stepped up and built the little park, children's park. And in the meantime, during that time, Ken Hendricks and his company, I think the city, or I don't remember the city or who became into ownership of the old pump house. And so they took ownership, and that ABC did, and remodeled it and made it into the visitor center. So everything else just kind of, I guess, moved along, and we had, I think the neat thing was that we had people involved who were decision makers. And I think that was also something we learned from the Greater Milwaukee Committee, to get people involved who who could make decisions. So we had members, and still today, the members I know are people who are decision makers, and you try to keep focused on that.
Sure, sure. How was it identified at the beginning when you looked at the river and you looked at this corridor? How was it identified that particular patch of real estate was what you wanted to focus on?
Yeah, I think credit would probably go to Phil Lewis. I think that's where he directed us. We brought him in, and I think he suggested that the river was kind of the center of the community, and it was the focus of the community. And so it would be a targeted area that we could probably do something with and have some benefit to the community.
Okay, Gary, you were here
Yeah.
at the beginning of that, and it had to be, as I said earlier, an exciting time, but also a daunting time when you looked at all the issues that were facing the community, and you guys as a group were coming together, thinking you were going to make a difference. And what were your thoughts at that time?
Well, we realized in our small group that something needed to be done. And to get something done, you go to the people who, what we call movers and shakers. And we were able and lucky to get these people involved. And a couple of people who weren't in our group that I'd like to mention, when we started to raise that first $2 million, it was a little sluggish at the beginning. And two people stepped forward to get it going, and that was Harry Moore and Ebby Neese. And through the Beloit Foundation, they created a $600,000 challenge, principally to the Beloit Corporation, which was then owned by Harnisch-Rager.
Sure.
And that challenge then really got the campaign going, and we raised that $2 million. That $2 million obviously wasn't enough to do everything, and we were very fortunate to obtain grant funding and so on. It grew into much more than $20 million in a short period of time.
For those of us, and that includes pretty much everybody here, I think, who've been around for a while, we have to, one of the things we always need to recall is that for viewers who may be watching this or reading some of the things we do in the paper, when we talk about something that happened several years ago, they may not make a connection. It's like that Beloit College mindset list. That what's common knowledge for us is a complete mystery to other people.
Sure.
So, Gary, tell us a little bit about these two key people, Ebby Neese and Harry Moore.
Ebby Neese and Harry Moore were key leadership individuals in our community. They were the leaders and owners of Beloit Corporation, which was passed through the family to them. And they both were very community-minded. Ebby at one time served on the city council, as I recollect. They, together with K.Y. Taylor from Regal, initiated United Way in our town. So they did a number of things that were philanthropic-minded, and this was just one more. So they were behind Beloit 2000 all along. They just weren't part of it, principally because at the time they weren't living in the community full-time, and they wanted to leave it to the people who were here, who had firsthand knowledge of what was going on.
And the Beloit Foundation essentially flowed from these families.
Yes, that's right. Over the years, in 1938 or so, the Beloit Foundation was created, and eventually was funded by Neese and Moore families.
And the successful fundraising, the $2 million, eventually exceeded the goal, did it not?
I believe so. I think ultimately raised $3 million. And of course, beyond that, more money, but that initial fundraising.
And that money primarily went into acquiring the land, so you had the freedom and the ownership to be able to move forward with the plan.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. So you became president a few years in, and
After 10 years of Charlie's work, yes.
and
A few years.
a few years in. So I don't know, was that an easy act to follow or not?
Hardly. It was fun, and it was at a time when we had completed what we set out to do, and we perhaps started to relax a little bit and enjoy what we had accomplished. But we also realized that more needed to be done, and After removing the blight and adding all this open space, we came to realize that it needed to be used, and we needed to draw activity into that area. And that gave rise to another plan. And the key to all this, by the way, is planning. And that's what got the initial group going, was to put a plan in front of the people. The members of Beloit 2000 are self-motivated, but what you need to do is focus all that attention in the same direction. So once they adopted a plan and made it their own, then it was a simple process of going forward. We simply created projects that fit into that plan.
I think it might be, and perhaps both of you can address this, that this became a partnership with the city created a TIP district, and the state government endorsed the project, became involved, I think, through Congressman Aspen at the time. The federal government also became involved, and the initial seed money that you raised was multiplied through these partnerships and leveraged to create lots of improvements. How did you bring your partners into the program?
Well, as I think I mentioned earlier, I think it was the Greater Milwaukee Committee suggested we partner up with the city, and from the onset, we had a relationship with the city manager as well as the city council, and through relationships that we had within our committee, we were able to be in touch with the governor and make him aware of what was going on. And I think I'm correct in saying that
that was Tommy Thompson.
Tommy Thompson, that's correct. And I think we're correct in saying that we were instrumental in helping them to formulate the Urban River Program, which became a source of funds for us through the state for riverfront development. And at one point, we did have Tommy Thompson and Les Aspen come in to town, and one of our major announcements that we had at Beloit College.
Republican Thompson, Democrat Aspen, I might add. So there was actually a time when bipartisanship thrived in Beloit. Is that correct?
At least in the public-private partnership.
Well, I always got a little bit of a kick out of that, because the day that this happened, Tommy Thompson arrived with a guard and a driver and so forth. Les Aspen came into town with a small rental car of some sort over on himself.
Well, it had to either be a Chevy or an American Motor.
It was certainly an American car, yeah.
Within the district. It had to be one of the two. Greg, I'm going to bring you and Jim into the discussion here as sort of coming in after the initial phase and shifting, as Gary referred to try to look at what came next. And you fellows had some of the middle years where you inherited a mature organization with a good reputation that had shown that it could come up with a plan, it could execute the plan, it could reach out and bring partners into the program. But sometimes people think there's an end. There's a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end. Was there any sense along the way that boy, we did our thing and this was good, and fatigue setting in?
Yeah, I think Gary expressed that well. I think we were celebrating what had been accomplished on the riverfront, and there was a little lull. And I think in any organization you can get atrophy, if you don't start planning. And I think that's the part of a leadership group, is to say, hey, we are not done. We need to sit down and plan our work our plan, and that's the phase we went into when I was president, and we started strategizing. We started prioritizing. What do we want to do in our next phase, and then we had some consensus, and then we went out and tried to get ownership for it. And that's when we really started focusing on the city center.
Did it, as the years went by, was it easier or was it harder to keep the enthusiasm and the buy-in from all of the key players?
I don't think it was hard because, the individuals that make up Beloit 2000 at that point, or in that went into Beloit 2020, were all very committed to the community. So that was an easy part, and that's why I say, they were all part of the leadership team and went out and addressed the stakeholders, may it be in the public sector, may it be in the communities that we might want to take our next step in. They were all involved with getting that message out there. And it's all about communication, communication, communication. And as Charlie expressed, early on, we didn't do that and couldn't do that to get the momentum going for Beloit 2000. But now it was time to really start to bring in some other stakeholders.
Jim, during your years in office, there were a lot of accomplishments. Over the years, there were skeptics, people who thought, well, Beloit can't accomplish anything, or, the 2020 group, who are they? They're secretive. Are they all really just looking for a way to skim a buck here? How do you keep the community engaged in a positive way?
Well, I think you have to keep, certainly the government, city officials, in tune with what you're doing. And we did that in a number of ways, not only having meetings with them directly, but there was a city center planning committee that would involve representatives of Beloit 2020, city representatives from development, and our consultant who we use, Schreiber Anderson, who were the experts in urban redevelopment. And we would focus on those things that people had committed to, whether it be government or us, to make sure the ball kept going and moving forward. There was a time when you weren't sure exactly what we were going to do, but we would take we would redevelop a plan and then execute various projects in that plan. You got to keep the city involved. When we did, for example, the city center master plan, we held multiple public meetings where we made it public. It's going to be at this place, this time. We're going to talk about this. We would take questions from the community. We would answer questions. And then we would roll out the final plan. Once all that input was taken and we filtered it back through the plan, we would have a public meeting to launch the next phase. By my count, while I didn't join Beloit 2020 until 2002 when I transferred to Beloit, there's been 5 major master plans focusing on different aspects of what Beloit 2020, Beloit 2000 has accomplished. And I think that is what has continued to drive the organization forward, as well as keeping the people in the community. They can see the results, obviously, Riverside Park. They can see the things that we're doing. So I think over time, the skepticism about what we were doing, why we were doing it, kind of melted away. And I think everybody is pleased with the outcome.
Gentlemen, Henry, Dwight, you're the most recent. As you look up and down the riverfront, as Jim said, people can see what has happened, and it's a positive thing. And in my own mind, having been here throughout the period, as a matter of fact, been here at a time when the Beloit Daily News building sat all by itself with demolished blocks all around it, and we wondered if they would ever be full. But over this period of time, directly, Beloit 2020's done a lot. Indirectly, it helped spark what ABC has done up on the Hill. It helped spark a renewal downtown, and you're looking forward not only to continuing that effort, but going across the border with the latest plan, which involves the confluence. So if you could talk about the later years and looking back at everything that was going on, and how do you keep that momentum building and growing? Henry, start with you.
I think, first of all, if this were Thanksgiving dinner, Dwight and I would be sitting at the little table behind, me in particular. But, I think the reality is that the plans were put together. One of them was connections, and how do we connect to the communities around us, and how do we add to the overall improvements in Beloit. And those plans were actually well set before I started. And you always say that, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And we had talked about it. We knew roughly where we wanted to go, but we weren't sure of what the right projects were to get it started. And we got luck. We had the right set of circumstances occur in South Beloit with leadership. The late Mike Duffy was a big proponent of improving the Gardner Street opportunity. And so the plan that we had talked about for years, the bike path connections and what we could do along that area, it was started by these two gentlemen on the ends. We had the opportunity to get started. And literally, that's where we are. We're at the starting point where Charlie was and Gary was back in 1988 of trying to find property where we can do projects that will bring specific gravitas, if you will, to the area and start to make the improvements. And hopefully we can make that connection. And at the same time, other priorities. I think one of the great things about this group is about every 5 or 6 years we step back and take a look at, are we doing the right things? Are we using our resources correctly? And have we remembered the principles that got us to where we are?
Dwight?
Well, we keep repeating three things here. We keep repeating about the planning, and that goes forward. And our job will never be done here. We just need to keep planning and attack specific projects and complete them and see what else needs to be done. That's where we're at now with the Confluence project that's going to be in South Beloit. And then the next thing is the leadership. And we need to, and we have been very good at replacing these gentlemen with people in their companies committed to Beloit 2020. And the leadership has to stay. And that's what Beloit 2020 has been committed to, replenishing our leadership as great people like our past presidents have gone off the board, and they've helped us recruit new leadership on there. And then the third thing that we've hinted but haven't talked much about is the leverage. And the leverage, Beloit 2020 has been incredibly good at raising funds locally, and whether that's through private donations or other fundraising efforts, and then leveraging them with opportunities between state and federal grants and things of that nature. So that $3 million that Gary was talking about earlier that they raised, they leveraged that into tens of millions of dollars. And that's what we continue to do with our planning and our leadership and our leverage, so that projects aren't so, they can be fulfilled in a reasonable period of time. And the Confluence project is where the Turtle Creek meets the Rock River. It's arguably the most blighted area of South Beloit, and it's kind of similar to what happened with the riverfront here in Beloit, that we're going to try to do some things at the Confluence area that are going to reverse 150 years of industrial work and jobs and the effect it had on the land down there, and try to return it to a similar state that it was before that happened. Put in an urban ecology center so we can animate that space with kids and families and teach them about what it was like here 150 years ago before there were so many factories in the area. And to bring people from the outside as a destination. We're going to have bike paths and canoe launches and things like that down there. They're going to turn this neglected area of South Beloit to a really cool area for people to come and visit and spend time there. That Confluence area is also the southern gateway to the 10-mile city, as we call it here, is from the city of Beloit out 10 miles. That's the southern entrance to our city center. And by taking back that Confluence and making it an interesting and inviting place to visit and see when you're coming to the greater Beloit area, is going to have a huge impact on Beloit City Center, the city of South Beloit, and the people that live and work here in our community. And we'll use some of the same tactics that we've been using for 25 years to get it done. Raise local funds to get it kick-started and leverage that into some grants, and working with, we have great leadership not only in the private sector that's turned over on Beloit 2020, but we also have great leadership in the public sector. We had Larry Arf just retired as our city manager. He was a great partner with us in all of our projects, and Laurie Curtis Luther, the new city manager, is really excited to be part of Beloit 2020. And then as Henry was talking about Mike Duffy, he was a really important political leader in South Beloit to get some interest in South Beloit to be part of Beloit 2020. And now we have a new mayor, Ted Rail. He is so excited about being part of Beloit 2020 and in the future. He can't wait to get these projects going. We're finishing our planning, we're doing our fundraising, and we've got the leadership in place. I know it's going to have the same kind of success that we've had north of the state line. And then another area that we haven't talked about either that Beloit 2020 doesn't want to forget about is kind of the 4th Street corridor. We did so much along the river in the last 25 years that one of the areas that's had some improvements but not enough is from Grand Avenue along 4th Street up to the high school. And we know that there's some work to be done there. So we've got plenty on our plate, plenty to do. We've got good planning. Dave Schreiber, our planner for 20-some years, has retired, but Jacob Blue is taking his place, and he's part of Ayers and Associates. I'm really very pleased with how our planning group works together, and it seems like every time someone decides to retire, we get someone just as enthusiastic to step in their place. So I think the future's bright for Beloit 2020 and the projects we want to attack.
The other person we should probably mention is Jeff Adams. I mean, he's been kind of the glue through all 25 years, and I think all of us who've worked with him have a great appreciation for his consistency, if you will, of purpose and all the work that he's done behind the scenes. While we were in the news, maybe he was the person who really pushed a lot of the initiatives forward and continues to do that.
Made our job a lot easier.
Yes.
Yes.
You mentioned that Jeff has recently retired, just this past month, as economist professor at Beloit College. What do you say, these guys get to leave the children's table and come to the big table?
Sure, absolutely. Great job.
I think it's also worth mentioning the confluence for those who may view this program and be unaware that the confluence is where Turtle Creek meets the Rock River is the most historic area of the community. Archaeologically, there's a Native American presence there dating back many years. When the first settlers arrived to begin forming our community, that was what drew them here, because the rivers, of course, were the highways of the pioneer era, and it's a pioneering place again as we move forward to try to reclaim a neglected area. Mentioning Jeff Adams, it's a good place to throw in that I'm not sure how long ago it was, maybe 91, 92, in that period, a group of us, and Jeff kind of hosted the thing on a bus trip to Naperville to go down and see a river walk there and help some of us get our minds around what might happen along the river. And a year or two ago, Jeff called me up and said, that I rode that bus and wrote a piece about it at the time. And are you up for another bus trip? We're going to Milwaukee this time to the Urban Ecology Center, which is, not trying to necessarily duplicate that at the confluence, but it's somewhat of a model to be able to visualize what could happen there. Is that correct?
Yeah, the Milwaukee Urban Ecology Centers, they have 3 of them there now, and they went into the rustiest parts of Milwaukee and turned around some pretty tough areas into show places in those neighborhoods for the community to come into. And it's helped take some of the worst areas of Milwaukee and turn them into their best. And one of the things we want to accomplish with the Confluence Project is that a lot of city kids don't ever get a chance to experience nature. And the beauty, just like in Milwaukee, the beauty of the Confluence Project here is we're right near the transit center, we're right in the city center. Kids could ride their bike or walk down and go fishing or kayaking and enjoy the different things we're going to put in there. We're going to have nature trails and storyboards that tell the story of the Key-Chunk Indians that were here hundreds of years ago. And we hope to have a lot of features down there that will be great for not just visitors and tourists, but also for the local kids. And we want the school districts to be partnering with us there, and they've indicated they're very interested in being partners with us down there to share that history. And And that's what Milwaukee did with their urban ecology centers, and we think there's a lot of what they did that would fit perfectly with the Confluence project.
And the Urban Ecology Center in Milwaukee has been a magnet for the schools there to come in and do projects.
Yeah, and they're in environmentally sensitive areas that needed to be reclaimed if you were going to have a project like this, and it's exactly what we have here. Is we need to cap the brownfield areas and reintroduce native species of plants, and we already know the animals are starting to come back. There's white pelicans down there. There's eagles nesting on Boney Island just south of the Confluence project. There's the fishery of the river and the creek have recovered tremendously in the last 30 years. So there's a lot of things already in place that we can fine tune them and create a setting that's very similar to what Milwaukee did with the Urban Ecology Center.
Let's shift back over here, Charlie. During this initial phase, and then when you were president, I look back over a timeline, and that period included such things as the Riverwalk being done, construction of the Rotary River Center, Turtle Island became a reality, ABC started to develop on the hill, dedication of the Moore Pavilion, the Adams Fountain, and more. Looking back at that, at the beginning you had to have a little bit of trepidation, which was, is this going to work or are we going to fall flat? And when you look back at all of those things and more that I listed in that 10-year period, was there a wow moment? Was there a time when you stepped back and went, we did it?
Certainly there is. Before I answer that question, though, I would like to say that, as most of this group knows, that at my advanced age, I actually grew up in the Confluence area. So, I know a little bit about it.
When the first settlers came here, I wrote that story.
So back to your question about the wow moment, the answer is correct. Yes, yes. For me, quite frankly, in the beginning, the acquisition of the land, I mean the property. When you think about the amount of property that was acquired, and the negativity was going on about us, that we were able to do that for me was a wow period. Secondly, at the end of my period, and still today, when I look at what this group is doing, I still say wow. I mean, the things that are happening, the fact that it continued for this long. Nobody would have expected that. I guess that's why we call it Beloit 2000 in 1990 when we founded it. So we probably thought it was going to last 10 years, and here we are. So anyway, there are a lot of times that I've said, wow, and still do.
Okay. Gary, moving on, you carried the flag into a new millennium when Beloit 2000 became an antiquated term. And over that period of time, taking a look at it, the city center plan was beginning to be developed. Riverfront 2, the Beloit Inn, now the Ironworks Hotel opened. Public art was located in the core. Same question to you. Was there a time when you stepped back and just were in awe?
Well, I guess there were, as with Charlie, there were several points in that period of time. One thing regarding our antiquated name, it was Henry who headed a subcommittee and said, we've got to change the name. It was 2003 at that point.
You thought you didn't want to be yesterday's news, right?
So he came up with 2020, which tied in our old name of 2000 and looked to the future. So it was a good move. First things that come to mind in terms of a wow moment were the wonderful sculptures by Vern Schaefer that were brought into the riverfront. And the first one, and the key was the celebration that was moved from Warner Electric. And the wow about that was that we simply asked Warner Electric and its parent company, Coltec, I think was the name at the time, if we could have it. And they said yes. And that was wow, just like that.
And then your next question was, how do we move this?
Yeah, well, we had to pay for that part. And Gilbank, I believe, was involved and did a great job moving it for us. The other thing that comes to mind is the Beloit Inn. Beloit Inn was part of our vision plan in terms of having a downtown hotel. And the actual construction of it and completion of it was very important, obviously, but the thing that really got me excited was that we are finally getting private investment into Beloit. There were outsiders who were buying into our vision and believing in us. And that, to me, really made a difference in what we were doing. People put their own money in and took the risk to build here in Beloit. So to me, that was really a wow factor. I sat back and said, wow, we're doing something now.
Greg, same question. You were at a time of transition, moving from what had been to going forward, and the accomplishments that occurred in that period of time. What was your wow moment?
We did adopt Henry's new name, Beloit 20, the new generation of Beloit 2000. The thing that I really appreciated that we did when we started working on the city center plan, and Jim referred to this, we spent a lot of time getting input. We had focus groups at the Rotary Center, and we had not one, not two, a dozen of them. We really got out there and asked people to come, give your opinion of what would attract you back down to the center of the city. And through that process, it dawned on me we're missing one of the most important stakeholders for our future, and that was the young adults. So we took that process into the high school and asked similar questions to making sure that we had the input from the young individuals in our community of what they wanted to see that would help keep them, or have them return to the greater Beloit area. So I was very pleased that we took that time and effort. And as a result, now you're seeing some of the outcomes, from the Vision Center and all the things that are going on downtown were really driven, and the priorities were driven by that input that we took time to get.
Jim, we'll turn to you. And during your period of time, as I looked at the timeline, there were a number of things happened. The Vision Center became a reality. And Turtle Island 2 went into development. Ace Hardware was moved from its old location up by the Portland Avenue Bridge to its new location downtown. Riverside Boulevard was reconstructed. The downtown was, all through this period, was really taking off. In your period, what do you remember most fondly?
Well, there's a couple things that you need to understand. I started as president in 2007, and the last two homes that we acquired along the riverfront were done under my tenure, and it was started back when Charlie was president. So these are long-term, far-reaching projects that take a lot of time to ultimately finish. And therefore, things that you gave me credit for started under Greg, started under Gary, started under Charlie, and it just happened that the inauguration was under my watch. There was a number of wows for me. And the first one was after my first meeting with this group called Beloit 2000. I didn't know what it was about. I was asked to join. I said yes. I want to be a civic, good corporate citizen, help the civic nature of the what I thought was their focus. But I came out of that meeting thinking, now these are all top executives in our community. They've got as busy schedules as I've got, and I'm busy, but yet they're taking their time, and they've been doing this for, at that time, it was 12, 13 years. And I'm thinking, wow, they're really dedicated. I'm going to get with the program and be part of this. As far as things that actually happened, there's two that I'd like to focus on. First is Highway 51. They were going to redo Highway 51, and the state was going to come in and do it, which is great. But that's right in front of the park, Riverside Park, that we had spent 15, 20 years developing. What they were going to do is take up the old concrete and put down new concrete. Oh, wait a second. And so what we did is we spent, I think it ended up being about $25,000. But for that $25,000, we used our consultant to design a boulevard. We used him to help write some grant money took it back to the Department of Transportation. They agreed that if you could get the grant money, we'll do it. And we did. And now we've got a wonderful boulevard in front of Riverside Park that we would not have had if we hadn't taken that initiative. The other one was,
So if I could interrupt for just a second there, as you, at this point, had the kind of track record that you had and success here,
right,
what was it like approaching the transportation department, the government officials? You went with credibility, right?
we did. Because we have shown a track record, and that we've all mentioned it, leverage. Mm-hmm. It's not like we're paying for all of these improvements. It's not. We're taking the seed money that leverages it into grants or private fundraising that really makes the money to do the things that we have accomplished. But when you approach the Department of Transportation and you have the support of the city government, that these guys are credible, they can raise this money, it makes the process a lot easier. And so we were successful, and now we have a wonderful boulevard with trees and shrubs in the middle and lights that are nice on the outside, and 2 parking spaces that give you more access, but still keep the river open to those traveling by on 51.
Jim, I want to add that when we met with the Department of Transportation and the question came up about putting it a boulevard, they said absolutely not. The engineers were against it because there wasn't enough space, and that's when we pressed on, and it worked.
Yeah, it's never been easy. It's the projects always have their bumps that you don't see coming, but the group is smart, and we figure out how to get around them or get over them.
Well, I remember when the boulevard was first going in, and I thought that is a little bit tight, and probably about once every 3 weeks somebody's going to take out one of those light poles. But that hasn't happened.
That hasn't happened. That hasn't happened. The other project I'd like to mention is Turtle Island 2.
Yes.
The original Turtle Island went in 1993, and by 2007, 2008, 2009, it had seen its useful life. And our agreement with the city is that Beloit 2020 would help fund and get this stuff done, but once it was done, the city would then maintain it and or replace it as necessary. Well, budgets the way they are with the city, they had about $125,000 to spend on replacing Turtle Island. Well, that was going to get some metal swing sets and some grading, and that's about it. We said, wait a second, we're taking a step back, and it was a unanimous agreement on the board and with the rest of the members of 2020 that we couldn't just let that be replaced with some old metal, not old metal, but metal swing sets.
Sure.
And so we raised $750,000 and put in Turtle Island 2. And I think
And
that
I can
was
tell you my grandchildren appreciate it.
there you go. It is. I remember the grand opening. How many kids were out there playing when we had the ribbon cutting? And it's a wonderful place. And we took another step forward. So those among many are my wows.
Now that you guys are back at the big table, in the recent years, 2011?
Yeah.
2013? 2011, 2013. For the two of you, this is taking it forward. What are your wow moments?
Yeah, mine actually are before and after I was in the position. The first one, frankly, was when Jim asked Steve Eldred and I to raise the money for Turtle Island 2. Mm-hmm. How easy it was to do that. I mean, literally in a matter of a few weeks, we had the number met. And that was kind of a wow moment because people bought into all of the work that had been done and the credibility of the organization. And so to be able to do that and do that in a community that had lots of needs and lots of other things going on, I thought was a particular moment. And the other one was just a couple weeks ago when I had some friends that were in town who hadn't been here since they were here when working for Regal Beloit when we originally started the work on the riverfront, but had not been back since. And the words that came out of their mouths at every street corner practically was, wow. Well, I can't believe you got that done. And we finished right across the street here at Lucy's trying to have dinner, and the streets were alive. The city center was it was animated with people. And for me, that was kind of, my wife said, wow, this is really incredible. I don't remember it being this busy down here other than a parade. And it's the way it was. And I think that was a special kind of recognition, I think, of all the work that had gone before.
Very good point. As we've all been here a long time, sometimes we lose track of what happens when someone comes to our community. I just hired a journalist who comes to us from Bloomington, Indiana. And her first exposure to Beloit after the interview, we spoke, and she spent a few hours driving around, stayed in town, and spoke the next day. And she said, I really want to come to Beloit. This place is gorgeous. You know, did you expect to hear that years ago?
No.
Well, that's what we hear these days, and it's an important thing. Dwight?
Well, the wow for me is an older wow that took place back in the 90s was, I'm in the real estate business, so close to me is housing, and we had gone 2 decades without any new homes being built in this community. From the 70s, early 70s, new houses just weren't being built here, and then starting in the early 90s to mid 90s, we started getting a small subdivision and then another subdivision, and new homes started. We went from somewhere between 1 and 4 housing starts a year in this community to over 100 every year. And that run went for probably 12, 13 years until we had the housing downturn 8 years ago. We do need to recapture that. We need to get it going again. But that was directly related to that's a residual benefit of all the good things that Beloit 2020 was doing in our city center, and it was happening outside the campus lines, if you will. So that was a big wow for me, and I think it was something that we need to get going again. And then a more recent wow now is really this plan, the Nature of the Confluence plan. The plan is terrific, and I'm hoping in the next few years we can bring that to reality. And that's a big wow. I never thought that area of South Beloit, like Charlie, when I was raised in Beloit, that was not a area that was very highly thought of, and it's thought of even less so today. Mm-hmm. So but the plan is terrific. And if we can take that plan and bring it to reality, just like we've done with the other plans of Beloit 2020, that'll be a big wow.
Terrific. A couple of points I want to touch on as we move to close the discussion. That I may be something of an old fogey, and maybe the direction of thinking has changed, but I hear a lot of people say, well, they pay their taxes, and these kind of things. Government is supposed to do this, and they look to government for the answers. And I think at the core of this group, philosophy from the beginning was we're not looking to government to do everything. We want to work with government, but people have to be involved. I wonder if any of you would like to talk about that where you came from with that philosophy.
Well, I think it's important to bring that up because, quite frankly, the private sector has more flexibility than the public sector does. So I think it's important to have that partnership. I think the private sector can take the lead and do certain things that, as I mentioned earlier, that the public sector can't. So I think you need both parties involved.
Gentlemen, anybody else got a thought?
Well, I think it's a lot of things in life, if somebody else does it for you, you don't appreciate it. When you do it for yourself, you take pride in it. And I think from the very beginning, the thought process was that if we had a purpose of making the community better and we could improve the place, the pride would develop in it. And it came from within the community. It wasn't one person or 2 people. There are a lot of people who did more work than others, but it was the community feeling that they had accomplished this somehow. And I think that's the residual that you get from doing it as a community with personal involvement, as opposed to hoping somebody else will come in and do it. And that goes forward in every project that we look at.
As a thought, you need the government involvement, but you want to drive what happens, and that's where I think Beloit 2020 is different from many other civic groups in other towns. We decide the project, we go out and we make it happen in conjunction with the governments, state, local, and even federal, because we've gone after federal grants. But we drive what gets done, and we collectively are focused on accomplishing those things. And we don't have to worry about the political ramifications so much. We can just do what needs to be done, certainly getting input from the population that lives here, the community that lives here, because you want to do the right things for the right reasons. But I think it gives us freedom that others don't have to do what would otherwise get done.
And I think the public agenda is so huge, and we're very fortunate to have effective governments around us. But I view our organization very simply as a catalyst, to get things started, to get that inertia, and we've referred to it, to do the planning and show how some of our priorities will help that public agenda.
Well, moving forward, I don't think we have to try to get a buy-in by everybody. I think the community realizes that what we've been doing for 25 years is for the greater good of the community. And so that's been very helpful. And so moving forward, I think they know our intentions are honorable and that they're for the better good of the community. And so I know Charlie and Gary, and in the early stages, you had to fight a lot of naysayers of the community, just because there wasn't a track record is really what it was, and that track record is there now, and so it makes it easier to get projects going and for people to buy into the planning and support us financially.
And to get over the hurdles and the misperceptions of what's the motives behind here.
I think the government is more of a reactive body, and a civic group such as Beloit 2000 is proactive, and we have the opportunity to put things at risk more than the government can. So take chances. Regarding the criticisms and so on that did come up, I remember one person that stood up in city council and said, "Mark my words," and you remember this perhaps, "Mark my words, there will be a riverfront casino on Rock River someday." And that's just when we were getting
I've
started.
been looking for that all these years.
But that's the kind of things you run into.
I think it might also be worth mentioning, Greg used the word catalyst, and we've talked about leveraging that the private sector beyond Beloit 2000 and 2020 as the city center has become animated, whether it was Riverfest or the Beloit International Film Festival or the Farmers Market. There are literally thousands of people from our community who participate and volunteer and have gotten involved. And again, that's one of those indirect results of what's been done, and to make the community attractive and have things for people to get involved with. I want to close this by looking forward. And it may be about time for another committee to come up with a new name, whether it's 2040 or 2050 or what comes next. But this has been a civic project designed to lift the community's image, get more people involved, thinking well of the place they live, work, and play, and in the process to indirectly encourage and grow investment and create jobs and this sort of thing. But 25 years is a long time. The community changes a lot. I was thinking as we were preparing for this that the newspaper did a very in-depth series last year on the demographic changes in our community, and the highlight of that was that 1 out of every 5 residents here now is Latino. Certainly wasn't the case 25 years ago. So it's a different community, an evolving community, and the group is in a sense challenged to evolve with it. So the question here is, if 25 years from now, a much younger group than ours is sitting here talking about the last 25 years, what kinds of things are you hoping they're talking about? You were there at the beginning.
Yeah, and I think I might be here 25 years now to visit with the group.
Well, you sound like a man who's ready to be president again.
No, I would hope that the group exists and continues to take on the challenges of the times as they will continue to change. And this group has done a terrific job to continue every time we have a new group in office to find new things to do and keep moving the community along. So I'm proud.
Gary.
I would agree with that. I'm very hopeful that this group or a group just like it will exist 25 years from now, and will continue doing what we started. And I think that can happen if they identify what the issues are and develop plans to deal with it. And I think that it's really the plan that, the plans through the years that kept this group focused. So I think that would be important. And there are issues that we face, and they're very significant. I think they're more significant looking forward than we had to deal with. We did a lot of bricks and mortar stuff, but when you're dealing with human issues and perhaps a deflation in human capital, I think that's going to take some effort, and it started already. And when I speak of that, I'm thinking of the partnerships that are now created between businesses and the high school in the technical training area, and the career advocate program at the high school and things like that. There are people, there are businesses that are involved in growing human capital, and that's real important. I think that's going to be an accomplishment 25 years from now, when somebody can look back and say, this is what it was, this is what we did.
And I assume one of the challenges that all of you look at is the challenge of replacing yourself. Identifying new leaders, bringing new people into the organization so there's new blood, new ideas. Great.
I hope the group 25 years from now, Bill, are talking about the next stage in developing programs, places, and activity for the younger people. You know, and capturing the younger people that they will maybe want to stay here, they might want to come back here, or they might want to attract their friends to be here. That's what I hope they're talking about.
Jim?
That Beloit has gone from a place you want to leave to a place you want to come and live. When my wife and I and my family, our children moved here, we thought this was a pretty good spot. Others outside of Beloit really didn't think it was a very good spot in 2000. But we did. We enjoyed the community, but it can be so much better. And you referred to Greg and I being in the middle. I don't think that I would necessarily agree with that, because that implies that beginning, middle, end. I don't think we're all in the middle. It's going to continue to expand and go forward, and I think in 25 years, if we've got Beloit to the point where it's a destination, I want to move to Beloit, as opposed to I want to move out of Beloit, then I think we're well down the road to accomplishing what these guys started out to in 1990.
Henry?
I think that's been well captured. I think all of us that have been around business for long recognize that we're always in a spiral. It's either things are either getting better and they get better because they're getting better, or they get worse because they're getting worse, and things can go downhill in a hurry, which is really where we had gotten to in the late 80s. And so I would hope that 25 years from now we're talking about the accomplishments of the last 10 years, the last 15 years, the last 20 years, because we've continued the spiral upwards, and that there continues to be the purpose of improving the life and living in the community.
Well, I hope that I do what Charlie did. Even though I've only been president a couple of years, Charlie got me involved in Beloit 2020 back in 1989 in some small way, a little fundraising within our own company, helping them a little bit on some of the property acquisitions. And so I need to make sure that I get involved get younger people in my organization involved so that they can carry the torch, and that the other leadership members of our Beloit 2020 are doing the same within their companies, so that there's a transition of leadership continuous, always going on. So that down the road, 25 years from now, we're going to have demographic changes in our community, and we need to embrace those changes, but that change doesn't happen overnight, and neither does the transition to leadership. So we need to be working on that all the time. I'm confident we'll be working on the planning. So we need to also make sure we're replenishing the people that are involved in Beloit 2020. We know the public sector side is always going to be having transitions, so we need to do the same thing within our organization, and I think the Beloit 2020 will be healthy and vital and relevant in 25 years if we do that.
To our viewers, implicit in this conversation between these gentlemen is a challenge to continually work to make the community better for all people who live here and all of those who are still to come. To our viewers, thanks for joining us to the 6th Presidents of Beloit 2000, Beloit 2020. Thank you very much for your work, and let's all try to keep it up.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Bill.